Welcome to the Greater Pensacola Chamber Toddcast, featuring the Vice President of Public Affairs, Todd Thompson. Join us as Todd talks to leaders in business, government, education, tourism, and other areas of interest to our local business community. And now, today's Toddcast.
Welcome back to the Toddcast. I'm Todd Thompson, Vice President of Public Affairs for the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce. Here today with me again is Lico Crump. How you doing, Lico?
Excellent this morning. Thank you very much for having me on another amazing Toddcast.
We are overlooking Pensacola Bay right now, and it is, while it's a little hot, it is a beautiful Chamber of Commerce type day. And
Agree, 100%.
And joining us today, we're honored to have Jena Melancon with the Gulf Coast Citizens Diplomacy Council. It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. But Jena, welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to point out you can see a sailboat from this window. It's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. It would be a great day to be out on the water.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the Toddcast. And let's jump right in. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and tell us about the Gulf Coast Citizens Diplomacy Council.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's
Absolutely.
pretty exciting. It's my first podcast.
Well, we'll be nice.
So the Gulf Coast Citizen Diplomacy Council, I founded it in 2008.
Okay.
And that means we are approaching our 10-year anniversary this fall. Pretty excited about that. I'm originally from Mississippi, and I attended undergrad at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, worked in D.C. for a year, and then I moved to Italy, where I did my master's degree in international economics and management.
Okay.
I've lived overseas several years, Italy, Russia, did some summers in Croatia. I've also spent considerable time in Japan and as a child in Germany because my father was in the military.
Okay.
When I came back from Russia, I lived in New Orleans, and by chance I found out about an organization. At that time it was called the Council for International Visitors of Greater New Orleans. After Katrina, we changed the name to the New Orleans Citizen Diplomacy Council. I began working there first as a volunteer, and after about a month, I was told that they liked me enough. If I wanted a part-time job, I had a part-time job, and P.S. they'd pay me for my volunteer work, so that was pretty exciting.
Right.
And from there, I eventually became the program director in New Orleans. And I was in Pensacola for what I thought was going to be a temporary move. And I decided to stay in Pensacola because I also have small children. Mm-hmm. And I felt like their lifestyle, everything was easier here with kids.
Right.
And, in New Orleans, I love New Orleans, but even though we lived in a relatively safe neighborhood, it was hard letting the kids outside unsupervised. They could go in the back courtyard, which had a fence around it, but not in the front. And I had to be with them the whole time and had to schedule everything after school.
Right.
And Pensacola is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids really just blossomed here. And so I stayed. And I continued to work for the New Orleans Citizen Diplomacy Council from home as a part-time basis, to the point where people in D.C. were saying, why are you still working to promote the state of Louisiana? And people here locally were saying, cool job, but why aren't you promoting Pensacola or Northwest Florida?
Right.
And at the same time, working from home sounds ideal, but it can be really isolating.
Sure.
And so I'd been doing that enough that I realized that it was time to just take a jump. And I talked to my boss in New Orleans, and she said, I support this idea completely. And I said, well, do you want to let me go now? And she said, no, we'll let you go the day that you get the green light from D.C. that you can start receiving visitors in Pensacola. And so what I did was I've been reading the newspaper for a few years. And once you are in this line of work, which is introducing international visitors to counterparts in the United States who fit with them professionally, once you get into that, when you start meeting new people,
mm-hmm.
For example, like now I've met you, Lico, And you are now in that little slot in my brain that tells me that if I have an international visitor who's interested in podcasts, I know that I should contact you and see if you would be willing to spend an hour of your time to answer questions with him or her, talk best practices, that kind of thing. So as I was reading the newspaper for these years, I was learning who in Pensacola had expertise or interest in different areas.
Right.
So what I did was I held a community icebreaker. And first I set up a one-page website. That was a learning experience. Set up a one-page website that was basically like imagine the possibilities, and then I had links to the Department of State's program.
Okay.
And I then created invitations, and it was to say, imagine what the International Visitor Leadership Program, that's the program, I'll talk to you a little bit about it in a minute, but that's the program I work with mostly.
Okay.
Imagine what the possibilities it would bring to Northwest Florida. And I had rented a place downtown. There used to be a Big Sexy Foods on Palafox. And so I had that reception there. And then 2 days later, after I mailed the invitations, I picked up the telephone and started cold calling people because no one knew me. I'm not from here.
Mm-hmm.
I had really thought that I was going to move on to a different community, and then I got busy with the kids, and so people didn't know who I was, but they got this phone call saying, "Hey, you don't know who I am, but I'd really like for you to come to this event, and there's no charge.
Right.
Hope to see you." And the turnout was amazing. So usually when you do an event, you expect about 80% of the people to show. So I had sent out 80 invitations. I was expecting to maybe see 60 if I was lucky, but since people didn't know me, I was thinking more like 45. I had 120 people show. Yeah. So it was great. And the people in D.C. had sent me photographs, and I had used them to create a slideshow. And so that was just kind of going in the background. And I just went from group to group and mingled with the different people saying, "Do you have any questions?" And then I had just a brief, maybe 5 minutes to talk about the International Visitor Leadership Program. I guess that's a teaser, right? I just keep saying International Visitor Leadership Program over and over.
It's coming.
It's coming. So I went from group to group to explain to them what it was. And then I had a piece of paper, and I asked, if this is something you would like to see come to Pensacola, please sign your name. Because I needed to show, it was a petition basically, and I needed to show people and the decision makers in D.C. that it wasn't me and my book club.
Right.
It was the community supporting this idea.
Right.
So the International Visitor Leadership Program was founded in 1940 by the U.S. Department of State. It was called something slightly different. The name has changed a little bit over the years. The leadership was added maybe in like 2004, 2003.
Okay.
This is IVLP, and it was founded in 1940 to help combat Nazi propaganda efforts in South America. And over time, it's changed and grown slightly, but with still the goal of creating bridges between our communities. And by doing that, we're contributing towards national security. Mm-hmm. We're helping to create economic connections, intellectual connections, and some basic education as well.
Right.
And so at any one time, I think last year, in the calendar year, we had around 5,000 visitors through the IVLP, International Visitor Leadership Program. 5,000 in the country. Okay. So at any time in the country, there's usually about 220, 230 people traveling, except for during the holidays. So mid-December, beginning of January, nobody's traveling.
Makes sense.
Right. So what can I tell you? We are one of 80-something councils in the United States that the Department of State trusts to manage this program.
Right.
Which I think for the Pensacola Gulf Breeze area it's a real compliment.
Right.
And it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, so name is Gulf Coast. Does that cover a region, or is it just Escambia, Santa Rosa? What's your area? So our area, we have 14 counties. So it starts with Escambia, and we program all the way over
just to Tallahassee. So Jacksonville claims Tallahassee.
Okay.
And it's part of their territory. But we go down to, is it Wakulla?
Right. Yeah, just
and
south of Tallahassee.
Yeah, so we do that. That's our little chunk.
Okay.
And then over. And when we had originally petitioned to open a council here, I had actually also asked to include the economic region, which would also be the Mobile area.
Okay.
Because at that point, the Alabama Council had told me they weren't. At that point they had not been doing programming in the Mobile region.
Right.
But pretty much simultaneously, I think when we were asking to be admitted into the network, the Huntsville Council, which does all of Alabama, was working on beginning to program in Mobile, and so we were admitted, but we were asked to stay within Florida. But yes, we have the word. So it's as you said earlier, it's a mouthful. So we have the words Gulf Coast in there because people in DC need to know where,
right.
And then citizen diplomacy is for the locals.
Right.
But I will say for Mobile programming, we partnership quite well with the Huntsville office. So if I have an idea for a project that would be a good fit, or they have an idea, or someone in DC has an idea, we'll reach out and say, hey, what about we could spend a day here, they could spend a day there, or maybe we'll do 2 days here, 1 day there. So
right.
we do a lot of that sharing.
Right, because Huntsville's not exactly close to Mobile. Well, it makes sense for you all to collaborate and work together.
Absolutely.
Just the proximity.
Right, and the whole nature of the national network that's working with IVLP is very collaborative, and so we've had, for example, executive directors that have been sent to Pensacola for me to train them. So I could say, oh, that's a competitor. I wouldn't want to train a competitor, but that's not how we look at it, because this is it's a project for the whole nation,
right? And
we're only as strong as our weakest link. And so I think at this point we've had 5 people come in from different councils in the states for training in our office.
Okay. So how are you funded? Is this through the State Department? Are there other agencies involved? How's the funding work?
So we receive a modest grant from the State Department. Modest meaning it doesn't cover our full staff costs. The Board of County Commissioners, the Escambia County Board of County Commissioners, it gives us in kind. So they give us a space, an office with utilities and parking, and that is a blessing, because if we didn't have that, it would be I would be making these phone calls from my house with my dog barking in the background.
Right.
We also do some fee-for-service. So there are some other Department of State programs that are not run through the International Visitor Leadership Program. Those include youth programming. So we do short-term youth exchanges, 13 days. We do some programs for U.S. Congress. So they have one international exchange. It's called Open World.
Okay.
And that's a fee-for-service. So that's an 8-day program. We do the work. We send a bill. We get paid. We recently did a project dealing with police, and this through an office in DC that there was a intermediary, so I can't remember exactly the name of the office in DC, but it deals with law enforcement and and police and trafficking. So we do look to find fee-for-service opportunities. We also have corporate sponsors, and we have members. So members pay dues. We also have a fundraiser every year, and our members pay dues. Basically, once someone's a member, I put them on a list, an email list, and we all have busy schedules, right?
Sure.
And I didn't want to have we don't have a weekly or monthly meeting, because I didn't want to add one more to do on someone's calendar.
Right.
So the way people support us, either they can do it monetarily as their membership, and then they can also support via time by meeting with the international visitors. And then when we have requests from the Department of State for a dinner in someone's home, so these visitors spend about 3 weeks in the United States, and they will visit 4 or 5 different communities, sometimes 3, but they generally start in Washington, D.C. The government divides our country into 4 zones or 4 regions, and the ideal is to get the international visitors into one community in each region. It doesn't always happen that way, but
Right.
that's the ideal. And different sizes of communities.
Sure.
And during that time, they would like them to have 1, maybe 2 meals in people's homes.
Right.
And so what happens is then I will send an email to my members saying, hey, I have a member of parliament from Sweden and this judge from pick a country, Mexico, and I'll say, I have these people coming in. I'm looking for dinners this or this date. Does any of this work for you? And I just do an email blast, and then I wait to see who says I'll do it. So that's one way our members get involved. As I was telling you all that, I realized maybe I should explain a little bit more about the IVLP structure. Or no? Do you want me to?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So when the government divides us up into these regions, these 4 regions, and then they try to do this balancing so that they can see the diversity of the country. That's actually a really good window for me to put my foot, or I guess open door for me, because I never put my foot in an open window, but I do put it in a door
Right.
to say, hey, why don't you consider Pensacola? And that was actually one of the pitches I used to get us onto the national network 10 years ago was to say, it's great when these visitors go to D.C. and New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and Dallas, but if that's all you're going to show them, you're not really showing them all of the United States.
Right.
And so one of the things that we have going on here in Pensacola that's a big benefit for us is the people here are so friendly. People are really excited about having international visitors into their home for dinner. And 95% of our visitors stay at local hotels.
Okay.
And they eat in restaurants and they go shopping. And I know they shop because I also have to take them to Walmart to buy an extra suitcase. Okay.
Take everything home.
Right. So the ones who don't stay in hotels would be the students. They have to be in homes.
Okay.
And then the Open World program, that's an 8-day program. We do that once a year. And the congressional budget requires for us to have people open their homes for their guest rooms for these visitors. But the rest of our visitors go into hotels. So being able to go into someone's home for a dinner is a really big thing. And also in a lot of countries, being invited into a stranger's home is, it just isn't, it's not normally done.
Really?
Right? And so to be able to come in and see how an American home is and how an American family lives, that's wonderful.
Right.
So I've had some people say to me, oh, my home's not nice enough, or I don't know about that, because we have pizza on Friday and play Candyland, and I say that's perfect,
right?
Because they don't want, that's how you live.
That's the normal American Friday night.
Exactly, and we don't all live in a huge mansion, and it's great that you have an apartment, and do you have a kitchen table? Is there a bar with the stools where 4 of you can sit and eat? Is that what you do every day? That's what they want to see.
Right.
And so I will say that when we bring these visitors into the community, now the national program, the program that they're doing for these 3 weeks is coordinated through different DC offices. And so they make sure that what we're doing in Pensacola is not the same thing they're going to do in Tulsa. It's not the same thing they're going to do in Los Angeles.
Sure.
And the national program, there are goals that are set by the Department of State, and we have to meet those goals. But when those visitors leave the country, this is my suspicion.
Right.
Okay. I know that when they leave, they are leaving with contacts of people who they can communicate with via Facebook, email, whatnot. They're sharing ideas. It's mutual. It's not a monologue, right? So it's mutual exchange, but we're learning from them as well. Because the people who are coming in, and I'll explain how they're selected in a moment, but people who are coming in are stellar.
Right.
But I suspect that 5 years down the line, they're still going to remember those professional meetings, but what they're going to hold in their heart is the dinner in the home.
Right.
Those are the people who, you've shared bread with them. Unless you're gluten-free, then sorry. Sorry.
So, real quick. So,
yes.
You mentioned exchange. So, we have visitors come here. Do we send people overseas?
Funny you should ask. So the International Visitor Leadership Program does not. Okay. So one of the things that everyone should know is that the taxpayer dollars that are spent on the IVLP are spent back in the local community. Okay. They're not spent in Morocco. They're not spent in Paris. Those funds go to our hotels, to our restaurants. They're spent here. Transportation budget, the airfare, that's here. But There are some fully funded reverse exchanges that the Department of State offers through other programs.
Okay.
Let's see, a few years ago, we nominated a young woman she used to be in Pensacola as an attorney. And we nominated her for a fully funded exchange, and she spent 2 weeks in Turkey. And on the flip side of that was her responsibility was once she came back from Turkey, she hosted her host from Turkey, another woman, a female attorney.
Okay.
And so they, shared best practices, and so that was the flip of that. Molly Taylor, do you know Molly Taylor with Escambia County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Molly, we received a call out from DC. They were looking for young professionals who were environmentalists.
Right.
And I contacted Keith Wilkins. Keith was on my charter board of. He was a charter member of the board of directors of the Gulf Coast Citizen Diplomacy Council, and Keith recommended Molly. So I reached out to Molly and said, "Hey, this is a great opportunity for you. Why don't you go for it?" And she wowed the selection committee, and Molly was selected for an exchange, which I think, I've heard Molly speak about it several times, but I don't remember the number, but maybe it was about a week.
Okay.
Maybe it was 5 days. But she went over to overseas and worked with a group who were part of the YSEALI, that's Young East Asian Leaders Leadership Initiative, YSEALI, I think that's right. Anyway, she was there to help mentor a group of young leaders there.
Right.
And they worked on a water purification project.
Okay.
There are other exchanges that the Department of State offers to high school students. And these are for critical languages. And you can go in the summer. It's fully funded.
Wow. Okay.
I know that there is a young lady, a student in Gulf Breeze, who, not through us, but had heard, her mother had heard about this initiative, and she went overseas a few years ago, and maybe it was Kazakhstan. I might have that wrong.
Okay.
So, yeah, there are opportunities, and we used to work regularly with what's called ILEP, and that's Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange Program. We don't do that now because we are working with, that's a youth program.
Okay.
And we don't do them now because we're working with Jóvenes en Acción, Youth in Action program, and it's at the same time. And our communities, we would be hard-pressed to find homes for like 25 high school students at once.
Right.
So we did the Iraqi young leaders for a few years, and then we're now doing the Mexican young leaders. But when we did the Iraqi young leaders, we had the opportunity to send, we'll put it this way. Let me back up. 10 students in the United States were going to be selected for this exchange. Now, not going to Iraq. I wouldn't, that's not what we're doing here.
Right.
So don't you're looking at me a little bit like, what is she about to say? No, so it was 10 students from the United States were going to go to summer camp in Virginia with Iraqi students and some other nationalities who are at this cultural exchanges. It's just like, just think summer camping. The kids all came back with stinky clothes, right?
Right.
So they were going to do summer camp for 2-week or 10 days summer camp. And then they came back they went to different communities, and we had a group coming back to Pensacola, and then these two actually were with the Iraqi students as well as other local American students participating. We don't charge the high school students who participate in our local youth exchanges. So 10 students they had spots for 10 students, and 2 of them came from Pensacola.
Oh, great.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that I learned last month. We started last fall, we started a new program. So we call it the Youth Diplomats. And so we have a Youth Diplomats program. We had space for 21 students. And we're going to do it again in the fall. We're going to start recruiting in September. And the idea behind it was to find students in the community, high school students, who are interested in international affairs or different cultures or languages, whatever their angle was, to get them involved. And we set it up so that they would meet one Saturday a month, and we would bring in different people to interact with them, talk to them, or we'd do a project. So we had the diplomat in residence come and talk to them one day, and then we did a U.S. Department of State simulation. We had Brazilian high school students, and so we did a cultural exchange. Like it's a game we play. We break them into two cultures and separate them and give them different rules, so that we purposely create chaos.
Right.
And then we have them interact and then watch the fireworks.
Yeah.
And so we did that kind of thing every month. And the culmination was we had funds for 3 students, 3 to 4, to go to Washington, D.C. on a special trip. And so the students competed for those slots. Mm-hmm. And we based our youth diplomats on a program that World Chicago is our counterpart in Chicago. And they had created this program 2 years ago, and I'd heard it from someone at the Department of State. So it's a brand new program running in Chicago. I contacted Chicago and said, hey, tell me a little bit about this. And they were like, hey, you know what? Why don't we just give you all our materials, and you can just do word search and swap out the word Chicago for Pensacola. So it didn't exactly work that way because we don't have all the resources that they have there. Like we don't have consulates and whatnot to do, but we were able to tweak it, and so generous of them to share all of their information with us. And so World Chicago, we coordinated our trip to DC, and World Chicago had 10 students. We had 3. Now the 3 who went, they were asked to give a $200 commitment. But then we paid for the balance of the trip. And we had 2 days in D.C. We spent time at Meridian International Center, which is a large nonprofit that works with the U.S. Department of State on several of their different exchanges, including not just the IVLP, but other professional exchanges and youth exchanges. From there, we went and we met with a foreign service officer at the U.S. Department of State. The students got a briefing, and then they sat and they had a diplomatic simulation at the Department of State. Then we went to another office in the Department of State, and they heard about all of these exchanges. So hopefully these 3 students, eventually the information is going to get out to the community. I mean, I put it in my newsletter when there's opportunities to apply for these.
Right.
And there's even an opportunity to apply for a month-long exchange to Argentina or Brazil or a couple different South American countries. But we do put that in the newsletter, but we haven't had anyone, to my knowledge, apply.
Okay. So if people want to sign up for the newsletter, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, our website, Gulf Coast Diplomacy. We took the citizen out of it just so it wouldn't be so horribly long.
Right.
GulfCoastDiplomacy.org, and there's a contact us page, and just say, hey, I want to be on your newsletter.
Okay.
And I can put them on that list. Anyway, these students heard about these reverse exchanges for high school students, and then they heard about the exchanges for university students, and I'm really excited. It's something new. I don't know if everyone knows this or not, but as a university student, if you participate in some of the U.S. Department of State exchanges, and these are critical language exchanges, and they can tell you which ones, or if possibly it's all of them, I don't know, but some of these U.S. Department of State exchanges, if you participate in them, then when you graduate from university, I don't know if it's your first 15 months or your first 18 months, but right after university graduation, you get preferential hiring for the federal government.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's something that, I don't know if for me as an adult, I'm like, that's great. I don't know if like high schoolers quite get that yet, but
it really sinks in.
I kept saying, guys, this is a big deal. Make a note. So we did that, and then we met with Marco Rubio's staff, and they explained how the process works and his work on the Foreign Relations Committee, and some of his different stands for different topics, and it was really actually excellent because we had just passed a on the mall. I don't even know how many thousands of people were there in memoriam for some Chinese incident that happened a few years ago.
Okay.
And so we were able to, this experiential, to tie that into what the staff was telling us.
Right.
And that was pretty phenomenal. We also, it has nothing to do with international relations, but I also took them to the Kennedy Center that night, so that was fun.
Yeah.
And then the next day, golly, what did we do? The next day, we went to the Embassy of the Republic of Belarus.
Okay.
And we spoke to their chargé d'affaires there, and he talked about the economic interests of Belarus. What kind of work does the embassy do? What is his job specifically? What kind of opportunities he sees? He talked about public diplomacy, why citizen diplomacy is important. From there, we had a little bit of extra time, so I took them to the Jefferson Memorial because he was our first Secretary of State. And from there, we went over and saw Roosevelt and MLK because it's just an easy walk there.
Right there.
And then we went to Georgetown University and took a university tour and learned about their School of Foreign Service and the scholarships they offer.
Okay.
And then we came. Oh, and then I guess we went to the portrait gallery at that point, and then we came home. But it was a great trip. It was great. And I'm going to tell you something. Those kids were phenomenal and so exciting. And they are now creating the leadership component of the Youth Diplomats, and they are going to, because the program is supposed to be a leadership program. This is our first year, so we kind of started slow, and but now, starting in August, these students are going to sit down with the other students from who want to participate again next year, and map out. I'll tell them what the possibilities are, and they're going to map out their calendar, what they're going to do, and then we're going to start recruiting new students in September.
Right.
Pretty exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
That is exciting. So you bring in, our groups are brought in from all over the world. Do you get to request? Can you say, we'd like a group from this country or that country, or is it pretty much dictated how?
Oh no,
comes?
we make requests all the time.
Okay.
So if I have a member who's like, I really, my Greek heritage, I want to meet more Greeks, or someone says I'm interested in, I want to practice my language, or it's my heritage, or it's my business, I'm interested in, solar panels or whatever. I've even had people say, I'm thinking about taking a trip to Thailand next year. Do we have any people from Thailand coming in? Right. So what we do in the office, we wear many hats. And one of them is proposal writing and writing statements of interest. And actually my colleague right now is at the office writing some statements of interest for the winter. And what we do is we look to see there's a place we can go online where we can see who's coming in, what projects, what countries, what subjects. Sometimes we find out a lot of information about an individual, but usually if they're in groups, it's more kind of a general thing. We can find out why is this group even coming? So we can look and do some research, and then we might find out that is a good fit for Pensacola. Right. Or for Wakulla or wherever, right? Yeah. So what we do then is we send off a statement of interest, and we say, hey, we would really like this group on cultural heritage, and here are the reasons. And then we'll come up with like a why Pensacola, like a wow statement, and then we will say, if they came to Pensacola, here's some things we suggest that they do. Right. So at this point, I'm not reaching out to different people in the community to say, hey, if this group were to come, would you meet with them? Because I'm telling DC, this is a suggestion. And we may send out 100 statements of interest and get, like it's just throwing your rod, like you're fishing, right? Yeah. So we throw them out there, and we might get 10, we might get 9. It doesn't mean that the other 90 weren't good. Right. It means perhaps someone at the embassy already wanted them to go to San Diego or Cleveland. In that case, they may not be coming here. Right. Or perhaps the visitor herself said, I've been corresponding with this university professor at Emory, and I really want to meet her when I go to the U.S. And so they're going to Atlanta, so they're not going to come to Pensacola. Yeah, probably. Right. So that's what we do. We send out these requests, and we also take cold calls. So I would say about 70% of the visitors who come here, maybe 60, come here because we've asked. Okay. And the rest are coming back because basically it's repeat customers. Right. Okay. So people I work with in DC who are like, that was a good topic, they did a great job, good communication, or I've been to Pensacola myself and I know that they can address this, so they'll send the visitors that way. I see. So you mentioned your 10th anniversary this year. Is any big celebration happening with that? Funny you should mention. So I just signed the paperwork for it yesterday. Oh, wow. So September 27th, which is a Thursday, from 5 until 7, we are having our 10-year anniversary party at Perfect Plane. Okay. And we would love for people to come. Yeah? Yeah. Open to the public? Oh, it's going to be open to the public. Okay. So we're not charging. This is just because the public gives so much of their time to our visitors.
Right.
I mean, the Small Business Administration people, or Small Business, what is it, Development Center?
Oh, SBDC,
yeah. They see our visitors all the time because it's this year's hot topic. So we always have flavors of the year, right? So like just with ice cream, right? But this year it's been entrepreneurship, women in entrepreneurship, this in everything in entrepreneurship.
Right.
So they see a lot of our visitors, and that's taking time out of their day.
Absolutely.
Hopefully they're enjoying the experience and learning from it as well.
Right.
But so we're opening the event to the public.
Great.
It's not a fundraiser; it's just a thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you mentioned entrepreneurs. So recently there was a group of female entrepreneurs from Russia that came, and I gave a presentation about the Chamber of Commerce and some of the things that we do, and here's some of the candy that they left as a gift.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to bring you your thank you note. I was supposed to hand carry the thank you note, but you will instead get it with a stamp and through the mail. Sorry, I forgot that on my desk along with my sweater. So
right. But no, I mean, it's fascinating. I've been able to do a few.
It's adorable. Sorry.
Yes.
A few presentations, either whether it's about the chamber and what we do, or some political talks with some groups that have come through, and it's always been fascinating, the give and take, and and the perceptions that they have about American politics in particular was really insightful. I mean, they really understand what's happening with the dynamics in DC and throughout the country. So very sharp people that are coming through.
Absolutely. So you want to know how they come through?
Yes.
Okay. There are no application process. There's no application for the IVLP. What happens is people in our embassies look in their communities at the work that's going on, and they look and they see maybe there's a need. Maybe they see someone working in something with the environment, or they see that there's a need in the community to promote entrepreneurship. They see where there's a need, and then they see where who is working in that field, and then they will approach them and say, "Well, there's more to it than that. They don't just there's a committee, and there's a certain amount of money, and it can only go so far. And so once it's decided how they're going to do this, they'll approach someone and say, "We are getting together a group of people, maybe 6 people from Bolivia, and we're looking from Colombia, because we had a couple of Colombian groups in February from Colombia, and we're looking at entrepreneurship with a focus on entrepreneurship, and we would like to know if you would like to join that group. And it's going to be 3 weeks. You'll have to commit to being 3 weeks away from your work and your family, but we would take you. You would be exposed to different people in different communities, and it's a professional development tool as well.
Right.
So that person might say, "Golly, yes," or that person might say, "No, thank you," and be suspicious. Why is the American government approaching me? And that's totally, I can get that.
Sure.
Totally normal.
Yeah.
Cold calls can be awkward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If we got a call from Bolivia, it might be like, what's going on here?
I don't know. Yeah. But then they might call you back. And sometimes it takes someone 2 or 3 phone calls before, or maybe not necessarily then, but maybe in the future, to say, "Yeah, I would be interested in doing this." So we work with different types of projects. One is called a multi-regional program. So it's an MRP. And those are always some of my favorite ones, because to be in an MRP, a multi-regional, you have to be able to speak fluent English. Okay. And so they up to like 20, usually up to 25. Sometimes they have these bigger mega groups, but 24 people, up to 24 people in a group, 24 different countries,
right,
all speaking English.
Right.
And maybe they're focusing on transparency or the environment, or combating domestic violence. And they're exciting because they are learning from each other's experiences as well.
Right.
Right? So it's not just about coming to the United States and learning from Americans and sharing with the Americans and us learning from them, but it's through these conversations that they're like, "Oh, we had that problem too, but how are you handling it in Mexico? I never thought of that before." Like that kind of connection, especially important with the environmental groups, because that pollution doesn't end at the border, right?
Sure.
So now I've had at least 2 different groups who've come here. One was not anti-transparency, that wouldn't be good. One was transparency group, and one was an environmental group. So transparency was it was a regional program from Africa, and the environmental was a multi-regional group, and they left having sat down and written up a document for further collaboration once they returned home.
Right. So
that's actually helping to strengthen security around the world and just promoting good governance.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty exciting. Well, we deal with these multi-regionals, but we also deal with regionals. So maybe we might do, say, a regional from South America that might be focused on combating drug trafficking.
Right.
But then also the embassies have their specific goals for that country, and those are called single country projects. So I think you met with our group from Oman, maybe last August, maybe, or September.
Mm-hmm.
And so that group also was looking at entrepreneurship.
Right.
And so the embassy wanted to help promote entrepreneurial growth in Oman. And so that's why they created this single country project for these people.
Okay.
We also sometimes we'll have what we call IVs. It's called International Visitor. So that's just one person who comes. For example, we had a leader of a Danish political party.
Yeah, I met with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And, I was told by someone in D.C., a very good chance that in the future he may one day be their prime minister.
Wow.
Right? So we sometimes have these individuals, and then sometimes we have what are called ITTs. That's an individual traveling together. So they have a certain interest, but they may not exactly be the same. So we had an ITT from China, for example, and two of them were environmentalists and one was a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we like to say, the people who are coming, so there's no application process. It's by invitation only, and they are either current or up and coming opinion makers.
Right.
So by that I mean some people who are leaders in their own field, and sometimes they're journalists, and then they'll go back and that kind of bears fruit through stories and through understanding of American culture.
Right.
I'll say usually like the second day I'm with the visitors.
Yeah.
It's pretty typical. The second day there'll be this moment if we all speak the same language.
Right.
Now, the ones who don't, the State Department always sends a liaison officer with the groups, and if they don't speak English, and that's only the requirement to speak English is only for the multi-regionals, but not for the regionals and not for the countries. All of them, if they're not English speakers already, come with interpreters. Mm-hmm. But I will say, usually by about day 2, someone will, like in hushed tone, say, Jena, Americans really, they're not what I thought they'd be like.
Right.
And I'll say, really? Okay. Well, what do you think we'd be like? Well, Americans actually care about their families. I didn't think Americans cared about their families. There seems to be a lot of focus on being punctual and, honesty, and I didn't realize that. And so, and I actually had someone say to a colleague of mine in another state that we're having lunch, and he said, I'm relieved that American women are not walking on the street naked.
Okay.
And she said, well, excuse me? And he's like, well, I've seen movies. And she's like, so she didn't say, well, what kind of movies have you been watching?
Right.
But if you think about like a lot of movies where it's like, shoot 'em up, bang, bombs, car chases.
Right.
That's not my life.
No,
that's someone's life, I'm sure. I mean, but that's
but
also
it's not common.
Right. And so I think if we just rely on what we see on the media and not have a personal connection with someone, we're really not doing ourselves, it's not, if we do that, we don't take the opportunity to make connections between people.
Right.
We're not being fair to ourselves.
Right.
Right. So that's one of the beauties of the IVLP. It puts people in connection with people, and that's where the citizen diplomacy comes in.
Right.
The Economist actually just wrote an article about the program. I think it's this month's. They titled it "Amateur Diplomats."
That seems a little.
I thought that was I didn't really
derogatory.
But then when you read the article, their article's positive.
Okay.
But I was like, maybe in British English that just sounds better.
Okay.
But yeah.
It's amateur hour.
It's amateur hour. Yeah. No, citizen diplomacy. It's the idea that we as citizens have the right, even the responsibility, to help affect U.S. foreign relations one handshake at a time.
Right.
And that's what we do by bringing these international visitors here. So we take them into schools, we get them volunteering, we get them meeting their professional counterparts. They have cultural activities. They go in people's homes. They leave with a better understanding of who Americans are,
right, with
an appreciation for Pensacola. And I'm going to tell you, Todd, don't get your feelings hurt.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you something.
I'm bracing myself.
I have yet to hear of one international visitor who, on their first day in D.C., when they're sitting down to have their opening, I have yet to hear of one international visitor who said, I really want to go to Pensacola.
Right.
What they say instead is, Pensacola, what's that? Where's that? Why are you sending me there? And I have, on the flip side, have also heard from international visitors who've been here about day 2 or day 3 will say to me, well, I asked why they were sending me here, and now I understand why.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a great thing. I like getting the international visitors talking with our locals.
Right.
And even if sometimes the questions people ask are not very informed. It happens.
Yeah.
Right? But that's also the beauty of our system. So the international visitors, some of the international visitors will look at me and think that I'm lying to them. Like, I am not part of this nonprofit. Clearly, I'm working with a government program. Therefore, I'm like a government handler.
You're propaganda.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, especially if they're coming from, say, China, right? They're not going.
That's what they're used to.
That's what they're used to, right? So it's a kind of natural. I'm not sure I'm going to trust what you say, kind of thing. So when I put them in, we have community coffees, and I will say, I'm not trying to be rude, but I want you to feel free to talk about whatever you want, and I'll walk away.
Right.
I'll walk away to the other side of the room, and I'll sit there and write thank you notes.
Right.
But when the beauty of the whole system, of the American system, is that we can ask questions that may not be as informed, right? And it's not like we're shutting down their freedom of speech.
Right.
You have the freedom to ask whatever question you want to. And if you've been invited to a coffee with people from the Republic of Georgia, and I've given you background information on PDFs about the Republic of Georgia, and you still want to ask, where's Georgia?
Yeah.
That's up to you.
It's not to our north.
Right, it's not to our north.
Right.
No, I love it. Our visitors love meeting. So I don't want this to sound derogatory, but normal Americans, right? Ordinary Americans. But what I mean by that is not people behind a big desk in D.C. Not that those people aren't normal too.
Right.
Okay? I'm not trying to insult someone who works for a bureaucracy. I'm just saying people meeting you and me. Right? And that's what the IVLP is about.
Yeah. So how can people get involved with, being a part? I mean, you got a lot going on. How can people, the business community, get engaged?
So if someone in the business community wants to become a member, they can shoot me, I'd like to be a member, send me information. If someone in the business community says, maybe membership down the road, but really what I want to do now is just meet some international visitors, I don't care who, they can send me that information via the contact page and just say, hey, I'm interested in coming to some of your community coffees. Or, hey, can you let me know when you have another one of your international speaker series coming up? That's all free and open to the public.
Okay.
Sometimes for the coffees, we might ask for a donation, but it's like $2,
So it's cheaper than your typical cup of coffee.
Yeah, and I'll pay it for you if you don't have it. So, if you're someone in the business community and you say, hey, I'm interested, or if you ever need someone to talk about roads, give me a call.
Right.
Because I've had a need in the past. I needed someone to talk about roads, and we found someone, thankfully.
Yeah.
But if you just, send me that, and I will put your name and your contact information and what your subject field of expertise is in my database, and I might not call you for a few years, but I'll call you.
Right.
If you're a young professional, we have a subset of young professionals of Gulf Coast Citizen Diplomacy Council, and they meet monthly. They do a lot of social activities with our international visitors, because a lot of these visitors, again, they're young and up and coming, they're in their 20s or 30s. Not all of them,
right.
but most of them. I did have one group of heads of universities, and they were in their 50s.
Yeah.
So, but most of our visitors are in their 20s and 30s. So every other month, our young professionals will host a get-together, and then every other month, they try to coordinate a dinner in a home.
Right.
And if they don't want to open up their homes, then what they do is they provide the driving to one of our not young professionals dinner, or to one of our members'
Right,
homes,
right.
and then they are included in it.
Right.
We have Youth Diplomats that we're working with. There's lots of ways to get involved, really. And if all you really want to do is get the newsletter, that works too. Just let me know.
And all of this is available on your website.
All available on the website. Something else we started last year. So one of my former colleagues passed away unexpectedly in January of 2017. She's from Pensacola, and she had her fiance had gotten a job in D.C., and so she left our office and started working in D.C. And then after a few months, she was hired to be one of these liaison officers that goes around the country with the International Visitor Leadership Program.
Right.
And Ashley passed away in January of 2017. And we, with her family and friends and with visitors from around the world and people in D.C., from donations from everyone, we created a memorial study abroad scholarship at UWF in Ashley Hardaway's memory. And we gave the first scholarship this year.
Great.
And the young lady is studying in Scotland right now, and it opens again in October. So that's an opportunity for UWF students. We have a paid internship. We have the person we have an intern already for the fall. But we do have a paid internship program that we offer to university students.
Okay.
My intern right now is actually interning this. So I gave her off these 3 months, and she'll come back in the fall.
Okay.
And I couldn't say no because she's interning with the U.S. Embassy in Peru this summer.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah. Can't turn that down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, about to wrap up. Anything else you'd like to share?
Gosh. I would say to your listeners that really the best way to make a change around the world is just to reach out here in Pensacola.
Right.
There's lots of ways you can make a change around the world, whether it's church giving or donating to different causes or whatever. But you can also do it by coming to a coffee and expanding your world and your contacts that way, and also and the reverse. And then also learning a little bit about the world just from right here. It's a lot of fun, you guys. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's, there are people just like us.
Exactly.
Really no different, just different experiences. And, it's fascinating to learn, just having been involved with some of these events. It really is fun.
Well, thank you for the time you spent speaking with our visitors.
Oh, always keep me in mind. I'd love doing it. It's fun.
Super, because you always get good feedback. Thank you.
Good. Well, and again, Jena Melancon with the Gulf Coast Citizens Diplomacy Council. Thank you for joining us again on the Toddcast.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you guys again next time on the Toddcast.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Toddcast. To learn more, check out the Greater Pensacola Chamber's Facebook page and follow us on Twitter at ToddcastPCola. That's Toddcast, letter P, colon. We hope you join us again next time on the Toddcast.